And today I kind of wanted to go over a really interesting game. I didn't know what to do or what player to select. I didn't want to talk about how I became a WGM. I wanted to talk about something else. So I was browsing through books and I decided to talk about Kasparov. And this is a really exciting game. It's not necessarily the game that made him a Grandmaster, but it's the game from the year that he became a Grandmaster in 1980. And it's just a really cool game overall. I really like the structure and the style of the game. So we'll just go ahead and see, I guess.
Was he white or black?
He was white pieces.
Okay.
He was white pieces. So in his book, he kind of mentioned that 1980 was kind of like his best year because he got, I believe, like 4 gold medals and a couple of championship wins, and he became a Grandmaster and he finished his studies. He does in 1 year what I can't do in my whole lifetime.
He was a student of Botanic, wasn't
Yeah.
he?
The
Soviet school. That was his prior. My coach told me, said he told him that he didn't like speed chess, it was garbage. He said, sorry teacher, speed chess is going to be the thing.
Well, if he was here today. Yeah. All right. Hi, Michigan Eagle. Hi, Kublai. How's it going? All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. It was d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, d5. Do you know the...
the accelerated dragon?
No, this is... we started off with d4. And this is the Gruenfeld.
Oh, yeah, he didn't get a c5. I'm sorry. I'm all off in the other thing. That's like a King's Indian or Gruenfeld. I don't know.
Yeah, Gruenfeld. It's with d5, controlling the center instead of bishop g7, which is the King's Indian. So, yeah. He even played this with black later on in his life. But in this time, he's white pieces. And I think I forgot to mention he's playing against Josef Pribyl in the European Championship in Baku, 1980. Yeah.
All right.
So c takes d5, knight takes d5, e4, knight c3.
Yeah, that Gruenfeld something there.
This is all normal so far. Bishop to g7, knight to f3, and I believe he mentioned that at the time, probably the most common line was bishop to c4. There are a lot of games in the Karpov-Kasparov match in this variation in the Gruenfeld, like a lot. And I actually studied some of them for some, because I played this as black.
Right.
So, yeah. But knight to f3 is a move that was played in the game. And then black pieces made a very curious move. He went pawn to b6. And this is kind of unusual because, first of all, the main move is pawn to c5.
Yeah, that makes sense.
This bishop, right? You kind of want to activate it.
But he might be going b6 to go knight a5 and then c5, but that's slower. But
Yeah, it is slower. I mean, you don't have to play b6 to get c5 in.
right.
So you can just do it right away. And the whole point of this opening, for those who don't know, is that black is giving up the center essentially because you can see that white controls most of it.
Right.
But the whole point is that with the bishop and the pawn on c5 and the rest of the remaining pieces developing, you're gonna put trouble in that center that you gave to white. So
Right, you're attacking the
yeah,
center.
pretty much. So b6 was a little slow. They kind of agreed on this. It was a very peculiar decision. If you don't want to play c5, you can also castle. So that's another thing. But b6 was played in, like I said, not very common. Yeah, this is a Gruenfeld.
You kind of give him a little tempo time, to gain something, but because he's going to have to do that later.
So, bishop to b5 check. And this was a very interesting check. In the game, pawn to c6 was played, and then bishop to c4. And it almost feels like...
A hedgehog kind of.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that white doesn't actually mind moving the bishop twice, because the bishop is more optimal on c4. and at the same time, the pawn is on c6. The pawn wants to be on c5, but it's on c6 right now. And then the knight also can get out to the natural square, so it's kind of trying to disrupt the black pawn structure a little bit. If black had played bishop to d7, which is a possibility, you can just go back, and then after pawn to c5, bishop to f4, this is just kind of normal. I guess you can even castle instead. But essentially, the bishop is a little awkward here on d7. You already played b6, so it would be nice if the bishop was on b7.
b7 and hit
Yeah.
the center,
But yeah, it's a little awkward here on d7. Nothing crazy or anything, but just that white kind of succeeded at messing up the setup that black wanted. Yeah. So this check was very interesting. Even in games from like Bobby Fischer against Spassky, like there are some fun bishop g5s creating weaknesses. However, c6 was played, bishop c4 as I was saying, and castle, all natural, and bishop to a6. Now, after bishop to a6, obviously it's offering an exchange, and in general senses, this would be beneficial for black because they have less space in the position. But at the same time, some weaknesses could be left behind after this. And one problem is that after bishop takes a6, knight takes a6.
The queen can come up, can you?
Yeah.
If you want to, but I don't know if that's what you do.
Where would you like to go with the queen?
I'd probably like to go d3.
d3, yeah, and then it's attacking this knight right here.
Mm-hmm.
In the game he went queen a4, so it's kind of similar, right? It's attacking here and
he's
here.
having 2 pawns. That's better. He's doing a double attack, forcing the knight back to b8.
Yeah. The problem with the exchange is that it made the piece worse, right? So we know that usually we want to make trades that improve the location of our pieces.
So he might have moved queen to c8 to stop all that. That's all.
Yeah, you're right. Queen to c8, and the problem is that you'll see that throughout the rest of the game, this knight on a6 was a huge problem. Yeah, it was out of place, and in these positions, it's kind of important for black to try and put pressure on the center. Otherwise, white can consolidate and start pushing the pawns. So we'll see a little bit of that coming up. Hi, Farsons, how are you? Okay, so queen to c8 was played, and now bishop to g5. So every move that white is making, right, like queen to a4, attack here and here. Right, now the bishop, yeah, if you can develop pieces and attack at the and attack the opponent's pieces at the same time, it's always beneficial, right? It almost feels like you're on the right track because you're developing and also attacking, so just kind of like winning tempos, putting your pieces in better squares. It's all good, right?
Right.
Queen to b7, defending the pawn.
Well, that queen's kind of overloaded, though.
That is true, and that's why he played rook to e1. And there's one idea after rook to e1. So let's say that black does a silly move, like pawn to h6, like they completely ignore what's going on in the position.
You take the pawn, he takes the knight.
Yeah, bishop takes e7, queen takes, and the whole point of this last move, rook to e1, is that now they cannot.
Protected, so you gain the tempo. Now you still threatening.
And that was the whole point of rook to e1, just to make sure that e4 is protected. It's a center pawn. You don't really want to lose it. You don't want to trade it off necessarily.
Right.
So just protect it. And now you do have the threat for upcoming moves. So it's going to be a little difficult for black to ignore, right?
Right.
Pawn to e6. And I believe that they were discussing like whether to play pawn to e6 or rook to e8.
Yeah.
Both of them are really just non-harmful moves to the white position. Pawn to e6, it could prevent some d5 ideas. I would say that essentially they're like about the same. In general, though, in this position they're fine. But in general, if you have the option to defend by moving a pawn or moving another piece to defend that pawn. Usually you want to move the piece.
That's what I would think, because you're developing, right?
Yeah, you develop, but also the thing is that the pawns don't go back, right? So you don't want to like accidentally move a pawn forward and then leave a weakness behind.
Get your structure.
Yeah. This was actually a trick question in in like a lecture that I was in many years ago with the Grandmaster, and the problem is that like I was maybe 11, so I could kind of 12. I could kind of understand like what he was referring to, but there were like 7-year-olds in the lecture, and they were like, "What does that even mean?" Right. So that was a little funny, yeah.
See, the only thing about when he moved the pawn, he still could put the bishop attacking the rook, and if he has to take a move and move the rook over, because if he takes with the queen, he still drop the knight. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? So the threat.
Yeah.
And I don't know would that be put the bishop in a better position or what? You know what I'm saying? Might get to d6 and then the pawn come to e5, and that's pretty rough.
Yeah, we're gonna see how this diagonal actually plays some importance later.
And plus that bishop keeps that other rook from coming to d8.
Yeah, that is very important actually. So, pawn to e6 was played. And rook to b1. This is actually a very interesting move, rook to b1. It has this one idea that that we're gonna see in the next move. Yeah, but essentially one key thing, oftentimes in the Gruenfeld, when you're playing as white, just to be sure, you don't really want the rook in the diagonal of the bishop, so just for safety, since the point is to move the center pawns, right? Since the goal is to move these pawns forward. Right. Get the rook out of the way so there is nothing going on.
Hidden threats back there. Right now, that c3 would fart both rooks. You know, the bishop would get down there. So
sometimes it's okay. Sometimes if you want, you can even give up the rook, and that's fine because this bishop is really strong and it protects a lot of the king. But in this scenario, that's not really necessary. Black already has the problems of the knight in the corner, and they have less space, so there is no need to like give them some sort of counter challenge with material.
Right, because e5 looks pretty, he's looking pretty good there.
We could play e5, or we can also try to play for c4 and d5. So those are some ideas. But before that, we need to get the rook out of the way. So this is more of like this is kind of like a prophylactic move.
Prophylactic move, yeah. But it's a good one. Also, his queen is sitting behind it. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah.
That might throw some tactics up there.
And this is Kasparov who we're talking about, so. Yeah. All right. So, pawn to c5 was played, and it's kind of trying to challenge the. It's kind of trying to challenge the center a little bit, right?
Right.
We don't want to take here because then the knight would get a really nice square.
Yeah, really nice square. And he's hitting those two at c3 pawn. Remember what I told you? So
yeah. Kasparov was playing Josef Pribyl. I think I'm saying his name right. I think it was the European Teams Championship in 1980, and it was like a team event, right? And obviously the Soviet Union won. And I believe he scored 5.5 out of 6, so it was like a really good tournament, really great performance.
I know it's a slow idea, but I almost like moving the queen to c4 and start that a pawn up there because his queen is backed up. That's a long range plan.
In general, this could be an idea just to put pressure on the pawns, so it makes sense. Okay, but let's see what happened, because I think you might be in the right track. So d5 was played, and that was another one of the strong points of rook b1, right? As mentioned, now the rook's went before.
The rook can come if the queen can't leave the knight actually, so it's kind of a stronger threat than it looks like, isn't it?
Yeah, so this is not possible because this is hanging, the knight protects b5, so it's all good. And technically you could play this if you want to, but this is not as good. This is not as good as just taking the pawn right away, because you do open up the e file. So now
Right.
Oh, whoops. I moved something. Now there are ideas of
Like
rook
the
to
rook come
e7.
to E7. Woo! He done infiltrated his back rank. That little pass pawn is getting strong. Man.
Yeah. So this can be a problem. So that is why they didn't take, but they did play bishop takes c3. And after bishop takes c3, simply rook d1. So just as a general thing of some Gruenfeld structures, sometimes it's okay to give up the pawn on c3. I mean, it's not the best thing in the world, right? If you don't have to, don't do it.
Right.
But
if you do, it's gonna give you an open file. If you get little comp for it,
in this case, you don't get an open file, but you do get compensation because of the strong pawn here on d5. And in this specific scenario, the bishop on c3, right now it's a little bit loose. The knight is on a6, which might need to regroup in the future. The bishop controls a really strong diagonal, and the pawn also has ideas of promoting. So in this moment, there are a lot of things that black needs to take care of, and they might not be able to take care of all of those things at the same time. So white will have enough compensation in the sense that their idea is very clear, just pushing the pawn forward. And at the same time, it's hard to keep everything under control as black. So, for example, the pawn on c5 is an extra pawn that black has, but you can't really compare it to the strength of the pawn on d5.
Right.
Simply because, it just has a straight way ahead to keep going to promotion. Yeah.
That's why I thought queen to c4 hitting the bishop would force him to do something and affect the pawn, and then move the way for the a2 pawn to come up. I'm just thinking. I'm not a grandmaster. I need to think.
Well, you're not a grandmaster, so that's why you're in How to Become a Grandmaster. Right. Here in this scenario, though, we do have the pawn on d5, which, like I said earlier, it's very strong. So we don't really need to play a4, a5 right now, just because we have one clear plan, and we can go ahead with that quickly. So, rook to d1, e takes d5, e takes d5. Now it makes more sense. The rook is not on the e file, so it can't get to e7. So bishop to g7, simply going back, makes sense. Don't leave pieces unprotected. So. Right. Bishop back, pawn to d6. You can kind of tell that it's beginning to get serious with the d pawn. It's very close to, yeah. I mean, if it gets to d7, and all of a sudden you have to be very worried.
Square, so that bishop, boy, is getting rough down there, and the rooks can't come and oppose it, and the queen can't oppose it.
Yeah, the queen is also stuck defending this knight right here, and the knight doesn't have great squares, as we can see. So there are just a lot of things going on right now. And that is why black decided to play pawn to f6. And pawn to f6, it makes sense because it is blocking the bishop from controlling...
the queen square.
Yeah, from controlling the queening square. So I feel like this is a good moment to stop for a little bit. Let me take away this arrow. To stop for a little bit and try and see what's the right way to continue. You don't have to give me like in a specific move in particular. It would be nice if you calculate because this is a Kasparov game, like you had it set up from the start. But this is a good moment to try and think about what is actually going on in the position, and anyone present or in chat, feel free to just say what you think is interesting about the position and something that you think might be able to help you find the correct move. Or if you have a variation, you can say it as well. Just don't tell me like one move and that's it. But yeah, I guess anything works anyway. So yeah, just take like a moment to try and see what's going on here. Based on what I mentioned before, which I guess are some hints, but also what you realize on your own. Or you can have like a couple of candidate moves and then try to come up with a variation. So we have one line suggested with queen c4, king h8, and bishop f4. We are grouping the bishop. That's one thing. Or bishop e3, it seems. Okay. I'm gonna give it a few minutes because this is like a very interesting position. But bishop e3 does not threaten bishop takes e5. The pawn cannot take it, but the knight can. So that's the thing to be careful about. The pawn could be a weakness in the future, but right now the knight is still protecting it. Yeah. Thalia just wants the 5-minute break. Now I know we'll get some moves. I'm giving you guys a chance. Queen f7 is not an idea that black has in the future because it's gonna keep the knight unprotected. So. But I mean, if the knight moves, then yeah, the queen is free to do whatever.
They swap queens that'll free the knight a little bit. So,
Mm-hmm.
don't want to let the pressure off of him like that.
Oh, you mean after? Okay, so we're saying bishop here with the threat.
c4, then he could pull the queen up, but if he does and they swap, then the knight would be free, which take the pressure off. So
yeah, white doesn't actually want to make that many trades here because remember they're pawn down, so they want to use the initiative that they have from the pawn, and also f6. If you think about it, never play f6, right? The king might be weak, so.
He blocked his bishop, which was the strongest piece in.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he had to do it because some threats were getting pretty strong now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rook a1 to play rook e7. That's an interesting idea, rook a1.
Threatening to get the queen off of there and push the pawn in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so rook a1, let's see.
Yeah, then maybe that check at c4 would be strong, because he can infiltrate his 7th rank. That'd be pretty rough.
Let's say takes. I'm guessing rook e7. I'll play queen d5. I think this works. And if here I think I have this. Queen takes here and here. And also this. So I think the fact that the queen manages to get away is a good thing for black.
Yeah, he can double them rooks and then break the queen to the back, right? That's what I'm looking at.
But I feel like, the move rook e1 is kind of close. The focus of this position and the idea of the move that was played is the fact that black's pieces, as mentioned before, are very stuck, right?
Right.
So
he probably did something a little more subtle, like queen to rook to bishop to e3 or something.
okay,
right.
maybe I'll show what I'll give like a minute or two if anyone wants to give a last suggestion, and then I might show the move that I mean. Someone is blaring their current horn, indicating they would like to suggest a move. I think it's more of like a sound of like, no, this is not the move. But whatever. I mean, to be fair, it's a very direct threat, right? The pawn to f6. And at the same time, you know, does weaken the diagonal. The knight on a6 still kind of far away. I would say it's a hard move to guess just by looking at the position, this one that was played. But once you start thinking about it, it's kind of like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and show the move, and then you guys can tell me if you ever considered it or not. 95. What's the point of 95?
I thought about that. Because it puts the pressure on F7 if he gets that check in now. You got to be very careful. Oh, well, if he takes that way.
I guess this is the plan, right?
Yeah, that's a point.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think he'd take the knight. I thought he'd take the bishop.
If he takes the bishop, I think taking the bishop, this can get very interesting. But I think taking the bishop, let's say, I don't know what you want to do now, though.
Well, the check
So
would
here
be
I
pretty
take.
hard to deal with now.
Well, actually, check, I can just move away, because if knight f7 is covered twice.
Well,
So,
well, okay, then the pawn pushes.
but be careful, because you're running out of pieces.
Yeah, that's true. That's why I'll be way behind him on it.
It's a little bit, it's kind of close to that idea. But you see, as a final hint, 95 takes queen here, king here. Wait, you're saying knight g6 and then rook left ideas. I have rook f4. Yeah, I think I have rook f4. Or bishop h6. But yeah, so the problem with this position, right, is that you don't have time to play knight to f7. So that's gonna be a little bit of a hint.
All right.
It's gonna be a little bit of a hint, and the correct move here, or at least the most interesting one, is actually pawn to d7.
You just sack the bishop, and then the knight comes in.
Yeah.
You kind of rough.
The main point is that it kind of cuts the connection. Like, if you think about it, you divide the board, like in the D file, you kind of just completely separate the two sides, right? Because the queen cannot go anywhere near. It can go here only, right? Like cutting off the file completely. And it has to be stuck here, defending the knight. And at the same time, the pawn is just one step closer to promotion. And as mentioned, f7, it's really hard to cover f7 and the king now. Also, this bishop, if the pawn takes, of course, this bishop has a beautiful long diagonal, but it doesn't attack anything.
Yeah.
It's like me, sometimes useless. But it doesn't attack anything, but...
Okay. So beautiful, but don't attack me. Okay.
Okay. But this diagonal is the one that we care about. It would be nice if black had a light square bishop, but they don't, right?
Right.
So, yeah. So d7. Let's just go over some of the...
And you got time to double the rooks, push the pawn on through. Because he's got a good position. He just got a...
Yeah, now it's when the fireworks kind of begin to shine. So let's say that what happened in the game was pawn takes, takes here. But let's say that, they don't try to do that. I believe that knight before was the move that Karpov suggested after the game. Remember, this is a team tournament, so they have everyone, almost, I guess, in Europe, and they probably analyzed this game. I believe that Kasparov actually, up to this time, he counted this as his best game. Later he had like even more brilliant games. But yeah, up to this time. So if knight to b4, there are some interesting stuff. So queen to b3 makes sense, giving a check, king goes to the side, and bishop to f4, simply retreating.
The queen from coming to that nice square that we wanted to come to.
Yeah. And this is just a lot of advantage, like positional advantage for white, because the queen actually is going to do some really fun regrouping. It's going to go to b3 and e6, controlling some key squares around the pawn and also the king.
Right.
Meanwhile, the queen on b7 is not able to do the same type of regrouping. The knight is on b4, but it doesn't control that much. And essentially, white's idea is going to be rook d6, rook d1, doubling up. Also kind of controlling the square on c6 in case the knight wants to go back.
Right.
So yeah. No, it's not a Karpov game, it's a Kasparov game. Karpov suggested knight to b4 as like, you know, analyzing after the game. But this is a Kasparov game, so king h1 is not happening. King h1 is not happening. However, really quickly, there are some kind of 95 ideas, just with the fact that, you know, pawn takes here, and then the threat of knight f7 is a little more real. But after f takes e5, d8 takes. It's not so clear. It's not so clear. Like it's still better, but somehow it's just easier to go for the other line than for this one. So, yeah. Because there are a lot of pawns. It's 2 pawns for the exchange. So yeah. Oh my God! It's also his birthday today. I forgot. It's Kasparov's birthday. Maybe that's why. No, I can't. I mean, I saw it online, but I forgot about it, and then I was preparing the lecture. That wasn't planned, I guess. I'm also very forgetful at times. So, yeah. He's not watching this, but happy birthday. Okay. But anyways, so knight to b4 wasn't played, and you know sometimes you just gotta take and pray that they don't find the good moves, right?
Right.
So f6 g5 was played. Queen to c4 makes sense. No rook f7. Whoops. No rook f7. Pawn promotes.
Yeah.
So king to h8 and knight takes g5. We don't go the e5 route because of the bishop, but we can take on g5. And we're threatening knight to f7. And some other move actually. So for example, if I just make like a random move, let's say knight to b4.
Yeah.
What is one like? What is like a winning sequence here?
You gonna do the smothered mate? Let's see. Does that work? Man, no, you could just take the queen. He brings the queen.
There are some funny moves here.
If he goes like what is f7 and the king got to move now, I think he might could get the smothered mate if he don't take it.
Yeah. So
when he takes it,
there's this, but he can take on f7.
checkmate him.
Yeah, he has to take on f7. There's also just to change the move order. There's also just d8, and yeah, that is also winning. But okay, so there are just a lot of threats in this position. I don't know if there are any lines that I'm not covering. No, this is fine. So yeah, there are just a lot of threats here. So bishop to f6 was played. Kind of gives a square to the king right here on g7. And also kind of controls this pawn promotion stuff, right?
Right, but then the knight comes in and it does stuff else. I don't even know if you can just, well, no, you can't just queen.
Yeah. So, if going to f7 right now, there's just king g7, and
Right.
there's not much, really.
Right.
Here, I think you can just, I don't know if you can take. I guess you can take. Yeah, I guess you can take. Something like this. And all of a sudden it's white who's in trouble. Yeah. So the knight going the f7 route kind of doesn't fulfill any purpose right now. So knight to e6, knight to c7. Knight to c7. So essentially what black is trying to do, they're trying to give back some of the material, right? To try and defend and make things a little bit easier. Also, as mentioned, the knight kind of was doing nothing on e6, so at least now on c7 it's a little bit more in the game, right? And if you manage to trade off the knight on c7 for the knight on e6, it's a huge improvement for black, because the knight was always bad. And the knight, you know, the white knight was always like jumping around and threatening the king, so it would be a beneficial trade, right? Yeah. So after knight to c7, knight takes f8, rook takes f8, and let me think.
Does he threaten the bishop?
How do you want to threaten the
Well,
bishop?
now the rook is back, but he might think. I was trying to see. Let's see.
How do you want to threaten the bishop?
I don't think he can queen now. I thought, well, I can't threaten because the knight's there. I didn't see that they threaten the bishop.
I mean, you can threaten the bishop. You can play rook to d6. It's kind of a move that has been around a little bit. Like, you know, we mentioned before some lines with rook to e6 and the queen coming to e6. So that is one idea. Okay, so actually someone wanted to play queen to f4. That's kind of interesting considering what happened later, but I don't want to foreshadow anything.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah, that is kind of interesting because he's going to queen the pawn and then do some stuff. There's a lot of little tactics.
So this is the threat, right? Rook takes f6, rook takes f6 and d8. And of course that is winning. Also, the rook on d6, if you think about it, just cuts the knight further. The knight doesn't really do that much on c7. It's so close to controlling d8, but it's so far away at the same time. If I'm not mistaken, I believe Kasparov said that queen takes c5 was his original idea. You know, because after takes. Right? And,
then
you know.
Got busted, ain't he?
Yeah, there's just ideas of this. But there's one interesting move after queen takes c5 that can make that a little bit, you know.
Hazy.
Yeah, there's one curious move after queen takes c5. And then all of a sudden it's not clear. All of a sudden it's not clear. Yeah, I might be a little preoccupied at the moment to solve puzzles, so. It's just
moves to the knight moves to,
like here?
Yeah, that would hit the rook and that would hit the other guy's queen and also
Protect the rook.
Queen and square. It hit the rook and guard the queen and square.
Well, the thing about this move is that I can move my queen and attack the knight at the same time, right? So I think I can go here, let's say. And you have to defend the knight because the knight defends the rook. And it just becomes a little bit hard to do that. It's just one really funny move in this position. It's not such an important line. It's just one funny idea. So after queen takes c5, instead of taking right away and allowing the rook to get here for free, you can just take. And after queen takes g2, king takes, at least you got the pawn on g2. And it might look like it's close to doing something, but after rook to b7, bishop to d8, rook takes, king g7. If you start thinking about it, it's not so clear how to proceed, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's still better for white, but there is no need to get into these complications when you have a much clearer way to.
Like, he does have that little passer on the well, it's not a passer.
He did say that this was his original idea, queen takes c5, but then he saw rook to d6, so he went for it. Rook to d6, bishop to e7. And the question here is, how do we proceed? We have two main ideas, right? So we have the pawn promotion, And we also have the weak king, because if you think about it, like the king is very open, right?
Right, and if he
So-
hit him with the check with C3, then what does the king do?
Well, I guess it only has one move. King goes there. And these checks are nice, but there is one idea. There's one idea that is just kind of like very, I guess,
Just
deep.
takes it over. That's
Very-
why
yeah.
he's a good GM, and we learning how to become a GM.
Not just a good GM, maybe just the best chess player ever. But as mentioned, you have two ideas, so you can either continue with both of them. You can let one take over if you think that you have enough tactical resources, I guess, to do so. So in this position right here, there's just kind of a very beautiful sequence of moves. You can think about it for a moment if you want. Yeah, but there's just a really nice sequence. And the whole point of it is just to improve where the pieces are located, so that an attack can work better.
So that other rook might need to get in the battle, so they gotta see where they're gonna put it.
But we also only have 3 pieces left, so we have to be careful with what type of sacrifices we do, right? Because if you know, play like Tal and you start sacrificing pieces, you might not have enough to checkmate later.
That's true.
So, yeah. Did you say, like rook takes? Sacrifice on the pawn? The problem with this is that queen
I
h4...
didn't think about that. I said move the other rook, like from B to D, you know, so when he take, you still got another rook there.
I was talking about someone here in the
Oh,
comments.
straight.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, but I guess with the rook here, the same problem still stands, that there might be bishop takes. Yeah, there might be bishop takes, and after rook takes. Do I have any sneaky move, or do I have to defend? I think maybe I have to play queen b8 after that. And I don't think you have enough to win. It's past midnight in Europe and you had drinks. That's a life. Okay. Yeah, so it would be nice if you could... It would be nice if, you know, if you could kind of similar to what someone mentioned here, to play queen to f4. But it would be nice if this rook was more active, maybe in a more active rank, right? So that's kind of the... It's like a remaneuvering idea. After bishop e7. I can't beat you with my eyes closed and nobody telling me the moves. Maybe. Rook d3. I think rook d3 is possible. Let's see, rook d3. Rook d3. I'm trying to find a way to activate pieces, but it's a little hard. Now that I think about it. Maybe rook d3. I don't know if you are giving me enough time to do something with my queen, but the question is where. Maybe I can play queen to c6. And if this works. Because the queen is protecting it. So, yeah. Yeah. So, do you remember like some time ago when I asked for a move and it was pawn to d7? And that was like the right answer? You remember? So in this case, the right move is d8. Just keep throwing the pawn forward. And the whole idea, it's very beautiful because you're giving away probably the one thing that you have played for up until now. But obviously Kasparov understands how to shift the type of advantage that you have, and in this case he's no longer using the advantage of the pass pawn as like the main thing, but he's going to use it to allow his pieces to have more space and the rook to get to the 7th rank, and he's going to focus on the king now. So that's kind of the point. That is kind of the point. So after d8, bishop takes, queen c3. Obviously you can't cover with the bishop. Just takes. King to g8. And now you could get this position, but with the pawn on d7. And the difference is that now you can play rook to d7.
Yeah.
Right?
Threatening mate, and that's pretty rough.
Yeah, rook f7, rook takes. There are just so many things going on. And not only that, but also, I know it's less important, but also like there is a pin going on this side.
Yeah.
Right, right. That was just a very nice idea. Very nice idea. So bishop to f6, only move. Queen c4, king to h8, and queen to f4. And you see how like the pieces regrouped, and we kind of talked a little bit about, sorry, not that, about the queen going to f4 and kind of making a pin here. But this is just a much stronger version because there is an attack here on c7, right? And it's not so easy to know how to cover. The best move in the position would have been bishop to g7, just kind of forgetting about this knight completely. And after bishop to g7, queen takes c7, takes, and you do get into this endgame, and it's kind of the thing that gives the most hope to black. But white is still much better. After bishop d4, obviously very important is rook to f1. Not allowing rook takes because it gets counterplay on the king and also taking the a pawn maybe. And after something like a6, simply rook c6, and to defend the pawn rook f6, but after takes rook e1. The rook is getting to e6.
Strong, yeah, he's too strong.
And I would say it's like +1/+2. So that would have been the best continuation. Oh, did I not talk about what happens if rook d8? Okay, 1 second. It's not so clear. So technically that would have been the best for... you could lose that with both colors. I feel that way about a lot of positions.
So if he took with the rook...
Yeah, if he takes with the rook. Right? That was the question. So if he takes with the rook, what happens? There's kind of a big problem going on. And it's really hard to take care of it if you think about it.
Well, when that queen can come down to the file block and the queen can make it to f7, then it's almost one move to mate. Because the rook, the bishop's on the back row, and so how is he going to defend that square?
Yeah, it's not so easy to defend everything that's kind of being thrown out right now, right? You can't play rook d7 because of rook takes. Yeah. So the problem is that the pieces are going to kind of be stuck on the other side, right? So after something like rook d8, bishop d8, how do you continue?
I said queen to
Yeah.
There's,
sorry. There's this and there's, oops,
you can also
and there's this.
just move the, that's probably the strongest. I was thinking if the queen hits, if the rook hits the bishop, he can still move and control the square. So.
I think both of them work. I don't know which one is exactly more direct. I would say just both of them win. By bias, I kind of want to play rook here first, just so that I control the d file. But I think queen to f7 also works because you're playing queen to f8. And black needs to do something about it, right? And the only thing that I can kind of see right now to not lose material right away or get checkmated is queen to d5. But after queen to d5, we could play maybe queen to f8, but we also have this. So, kind of winning anyways. So yeah. I like to think rook d8 might be a little better, just so that this is not possible. But yeah, I think both of them should work. Like if bishop here, obviously this. So yeah. It just kind of takes away a defender of the king. So yeah. The bishop takes, queen c3, king g8, rook d7, and then we have this really nice idea, you know, continuing with the checks until queen f4. And as I mentioned, the attack was here. So, as I said, bishop to g7 maybe was the best continuation, and I believe that Pribyl later was, you know, kind of regretting that he didn't play this, but if I'm not mistaken, they had about a minute in the clock at the time, so it's really hard to play. You might think that bishop g7 is kind of natural, but he actually ended up playing queen to a6. What's like a move that finishes off the game here? There are a lot of good moves, as you can probably imagine. But there's one move that just kind of cuts the game entirely.
Queen h6?
Yeah, queen h6. And I mean, this knight is hanging, but we don't really care about it. Queen h6, and there's no way to stop all of the mates that are coming. So yeah, queen a6 was kind of like a final blunder. It just kind of doesn't, you know, doesn't even give a chance. It's mate in 4, if I'm not mistaken. Like, you gotta start sacking the queen and stuff. But yeah, that was kind of the end to this game.
Kasparov.
Yeah, queen h6 and resigns. Yeah, black ended up resigning in this position. Obviously, as mentioned, the knight was hanging, but you know, if you have mate right away, just
better than grabbing the material.
yeah, don't allow the queen to get in and maybe spook you a little bit. Yeah, so this was just the end to the game, and I thought that overall it was a very beautiful game. It almost seems like white pieces was.
I just noticed he also hitting the rook too. I mean,
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So he the
Yeah,
back rank or the 7th rank, or he just about got it rolled up where he plays it.
And if it almost felt like white was the one who led the game all throughout, right? So yeah, even from the beginning, it's kind of very like Kasparov style, where even if he has to give up a little bit of material, remember the pawn on c3 with the move d5, and they could take here on c3. They just kind of they just
opened up a position and
yeah.
let white get to join his pieces.
It opens up the position, even if it gives up a pawn, but it is white who has the initiative and who will be taking, you know, the leading role. And then we later just saw how easily it became, you know, to infiltrate into the position. And it's really hard when you're on the defending side, because you have to be extremely precise. Sometimes when you're attacking, you have the liberty of, you know...
a little imprecise and not dying from it, but you just lose your initiative.
Mm-hmm. But if you're defending, you do have to be extremely accurate. And, you know, as we can see from this game, black tried to defend for a long time, but it was really hard, and white kept finding the best moves.
And then time pressure squeeze, you know.
Yeah, time pressure always, you know, always makes things harder. So yeah, that was kind of the whole game. As mentioned, Kasparov believed this was his best game to that time, and I believe he analyzed it that night with Yusupov, and you know, Yusupov was like, wow, it's just beautiful. It's hard to play like you. And then he went on to praise him and all that. So, yeah, but it was just a very nice game. And it almost felt like it just kind of led that way. Black didn't do any huge blunder or mistake.
Right, just strategies a little faulty.
Yeah, just, you know.
Like you said, that B6, that wasn't really hit the Gruenfeld like he was about to get behind in tempo, because he should have gone C5 instead of B6. And then the knight coming over, that got kind of slow.
I believe, you know, some people said that B6 was the reason why black lost, but I mean, obviously it's just the opening, right? But they kind of mean that it was kind of the start of the problem, that B6, because that kind of caused the pieces to be in awkward squares, and as we know, that went on for the rest of the game, especially the knight on a6.
Right.
And then, you know, from that, white kind of got the ideas to play with the initiative and such. So yeah. Well, I hope you guys liked this lecture. and I hope the people watching also like the lecture. And yeah, feel free to. I don't know if there are any more lectures today. Feel free to watch if there are any.
And Dorsa's up next.
Dorsa.
On YouTube and Twitch.
Perfect. Amazing. So go watch that. Chess and Psychology, I think.
Yep.
And yeah, and check out the American Cup next week. I'm very excited about it. So top players in the US plus my Greek friend. It's just how it is. But yeah, go check out the tournament. It's going to be extremely strong. And yeah, I guess that's gonna be all for today. I'm just gonna go ahead and end the stream. So yeah, thank you so much everyone for watching. Bye bye.